Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the blueprint of the world's very first billionaire, John D. Rockefeller. We're going to unpack exactly how this one guy completely rewired the global economy and sparked the birth of modern industrial capitalism. We'll get into his strategies, the huge controversies, and of course, that unprecedented legacy he left behind. Let's get into it. $100 million. I mean, just think about that for a second. By 1890, Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company had exploded from a $1 million investment into a $100 million behemoth. It introduces us to the ultimate paradox, right? The guy was a meticulous, quiet organizer, but also an absolutely ruthless conqueror of markets. To figure out how he pulled this off, we really need to rewind. Section 1. The First Billionaire's Origins. To truly understand the tycoon he became, we've got to look back at the 1840s, specifically at the deeply contrasting forces that shaped his childhood. His childhood was defined by this massive, profound dichotomy. On one side, you have his dad, William, or Bill Rockefeller. Bill was a flashy, erratic traveling salesman, basically a con artist, who literally called himself a botanic physician. He taught John how to negotiate aggressively and definitely didn't shy away from ruthless, deceptive business tactics. But then, on the exact opposite side, you have his mother, Eliza. She was incredibly frugal, deeply devout, and just famously patient. She instilled in him this quiet, calculating nature. So you end up with a kid raised with the ruthless cunning of a con man, combined with the meticulous patience of a saint. In that calculating patience, it paid off in a huge way during a defining moment in 1865. Rockefeller is just 25 years old, dealing with some hesitant business partners, and he makes this incredibly bold move. He bids $72,500 at auction to buy them out completely and take full control of the Excelsior refinery. Just imagine the sheer nerve of a 25-year-old putting up that kind of capital back then. That massive gamble put him squarely in the driver's seat. Section 2. Chaos in the oil market. Now, Rockefeller's early success lined up perfectly with the American Industrial Revolution. But here's the thing. The early petroleum industry was dangerously unstable. Congressman and future President James Garfield really hit the nail on the head when he said, "Oil, not cotton, is king now in the world of commerce." The post-Civil War era brought a huge shift. Industrial capitalism was rapidly replacing agrarianism, and oil was quickly becoming the absolute lifeblood of this massive new American economy. Everyone wanted a piece of the action. But as you can probably guess, that gold rush mentality caused a massive problem. By 1870, the market was just completely flooded. We're talking a supply being 3 times higher than demand. This insane overproduction tanked kerosene prices and absolutely ruined profit margins for refiners everywhere. Looking at this wild, volatile boom and bust cycle, Rockefeller made a choice. He decided the only way to save the industry from destroying itself was to bring absolute order to all this chaos. Section 3. The Standard Oil Juggernaut. To achieve that desperately needed order, Rockefeller rolled out a flawless, incredibly aggressive business strategy. It's basically the ultimate empire playbook. He used a brutal 3-step approach. Step 1, leverage his massive size to secretly negotiate huge freight discounts or rebates with the railroads. This severely undercut his rivals' transportation costs. Step 2, armed with that unfair advantage, systematically buy out struggling local competitors. And step 3, when the railroads inevitably pushed back, he just bypassed them entirely by building his own independent pipeline networks. Truly a masterclass in total vertical and horizontal integration. The sheer velocity of this consolidation is honestly hard to wrap your head around today. He incorporates Standard Oil in 1870. Just 2 years later, in 1872, he pulls off what became known as the Cleveland Massacre, scooping up 22 of his 26 Cleveland competitors in a matter of mere months. And by 1879, he secures total control over nearly the entire country's pipeline system. He basically swallowed a national industry whole in under a decade. This relentless expansion meant that by 1879, Standard Oil controlled a staggering 90% of the oil refining capacity in the United States. 90%. He was, for all intents and purposes, the entire industry. But you don't reach dominance on that scale without making some serious enemies. Section 4. The Trust and Backlash. Unprecedented market dominance is obviously going to breed unprecedented resistance. And that forced Rockefeller to invent entirely new legal frameworks just to protect his sprawling empire. At the time, companies weren't legally allowed to own subsidiaries across state lines. So in 1882, Standard Oil pioneered this concept of the trust. Essentially, 9 trustees managed 41 separate companies across multiple states. It was a highly innovative way to bypass state laws, but it also painted a massive, unmissable target right on Rockefeller's back. In fact, the word trust quickly became completely synonymous with unchecked monopoly power. Unsurprisingly, the public and the government pushed back hard. Investigative journalists, the famous muckrakers like Ida Tarbell, started publishing massive exposés detailing Standard's secret tactics. Then came the lawsuits, piling up from both state and federal governments. Things even escalated into sheer violence, highlighted by tragic labor clashes like the 1914 Ludlow Massacre in Colorado, where striking workers and their families were killed at a Rockefeller-owned mining operation. The empire was officially under siege from all sides. When we look at this tense period, we really see 2 very different perspectives clashing. Standard's stance was that Rockefeller was an industrial savior. They argued he was stabilizing a chaotic market, preventing ruinous competition, providing reliable job security, and actually supplying cheap oil to the everyday public. But the critics, they saw a totally different picture. They saw ruthless monopolization, unethical secret railroad deals, and a machine designed to actively crush independent businesses. Section 5. The breakup of an empire. The government's eventual response to all this massive public outcry would fundamentally alter the landscape of global business forever. Even though rising international competition in Russia and Asia was slowly starting to chip away at his absolute monopoly, Standard Oil still controlled a massive 70% of the U.S. refined oil market by 1911. They were just too big for the government to ignore. And so the hammer finally dropped. In May of 1911, the Supreme Court ordered the outright dissolution of the Standard Oil Trust under the Sherman Antitrust Act. The highest court in the land gave this massive, sprawling entity just 6 short months to disband into 34 completely independent companies. But here is the wild irony of this whole breakup. This forced fragmentation actually created some of the most recognizable energy brands we know today, companies that would eventually become Exxon, Chevron, Mobil, and Conoco. And because the public could now suddenly buy shares in these 34 newly independent companies, their combined stock prices just absolutely skyrocketed. So the government's attempt to penalize Rockefeller actually drove his net worth so high that it officially made him the world's first billionaire. You really can't make this stuff up. Section 6. A complicated philanthropic legacy. In the final act of his life, this ruthless boardroom tactician shifted his entire focus toward an unprecedented redistribution of his vast wealth. Flush with all that cash from the 1911 breakup, he seeded the newly chartered Rockefeller Foundation with a colossal $183 million. And remember, we're talking about $1913 here. The sheer scale of that initial endowment is genuinely awe-inspiring. His main goal with this staggering sum was to support global medical research and major public health initiatives. His laser-focused philanthropy genuinely laid the permanent groundwork for major modern institutions. He provided foundational support for Spelman College, poured millions into establishing the University of Chicago, and created what is now Rockefeller University, along with the massively influential Rockefeller Foundation. The massive scale of his charitable giving perfectly matched the sheer scale of his corporate ambitions. Which leaves us with a fascinating, vital question. As we look back at the chaotic industry he stabilized, the immense wealth he accumulated, the ruthless tactics he used, and the massive institutions he ultimately funded, what are we supposed to conclude? Was John D. Rockefeller a visionary industrialist who nurtured America's economy into the modern age? Or was he a ruthless monopolist who crushed the American ideal of free competition by any means necessary? I'll leave you to weigh the history and decide his true legacy for yourself.